Direction and bearing are one of the ways used in locating places on the map. This tutorial unveils how bearing can be calculated from given real-life situation. We shall start with more information on bearing, and we find out that bearing are always measured clockwise from north and are given or rather stated in 3 digits. So we have two types of bearing. We have compass bearing and we have true bearing. Now we shall be using, or rather we shall work with true bearing. Maybe if you keep in touch with this channel, you'll be able to have it in our next lesson on compass bearing. So true bearing is measured clockwise from north, and as you can see from the diagram below, the true bearing is 010 degrees and this other diagram is 060 degrees. Now, our learning intention is to use knowledge that we have gained so far to solve various trigonometry problems. The knowledge on sine rule, knowledge on cosine rule, and others. Our success criteria is to be able to recognize the correct trigonometric formula to use to solve a problem involving triangles. So of course you remember the SOHCAHTOA, so you'll be able to know which formula suits where. So starting with example 1, a fishing boat leaves a harbor H and travels due east for 40 miles to a marker buoy. At B, that is the marker buoy, the boat turns left and sails for 24 miles to a lighthouse L. Then returns to a harbor, a distance of 57 miles. So part A, make a sketch of the journey. Of course, this is a real life situation, and to be able to understand it well, you are supposed to come up with a sketch. Part B, find the bearing of the lighthouse from the harbor, the nearest degrees. So this is our sketch. It actually summarizes the journey or the movement of the fishing boat. So part B, find the bearing of the lighthouse from the harbor to the nearest degree. So from the sketch, it is clear that the movement of the boat is represented by the triangle. And now, if we can have the compass point at the harbor, that is at H, then it means from the north line towards the east line, the angle between is 90 degrees. And the angle that we want is from the north all the way to the line headed to L. So the angle between there is the bearing that we want. And so that means we shall have 90 minus the angle at A. And the angle at A, we can find it using the cosine rule, and that will give you 20.4 degrees. So the bearing of L from H will be 90 degrees minus 20.4 degrees, and that will give us 69.6 degrees. Okay, example 2. An AWACS aircraft takes off from RAF Waddington W on a navigation exercise. It flies 530 miles north to a point P as shown. It then turns left and flies to a point Q 670 miles away. Finally, it flies back to base, a distance of 520 miles. Find the bearing of Q from point P. So this is another real life situation that we need to solve, and of course we need to come up with a sketch that summarizes the movement of this aircraft. And so before we get back to the question, we are supposed to understand that this sketch summarizes this movement of the aircraft in a triangle. And so to be able to find the bearing of Q from point P, we need to know that if we have the compass direction at point Q, again compass direction at point P, then you will clearly be able to see this concept of bearing by calculation. So because we want to get the bearing of Q from P, then we need to find the angle at P, after which the bearing being measured from the north, so we shall have it from the north up to the line headed to Q. That will give us the bearing of Q from point P. So you measure it from point P, but now because it is by calculation, then we don't have to measure in this case because it is not scale drawing. So we are going to get, because the triangle, of course we know the solutions of a triangle, we can use sine rule, cosine rule, the one that suits. And then we'll be able to calculate. After getting that angle, then we add 180 because we are measuring from P and the northward. From P, measuring from 0 up to the south, 180 degrees, plus now the angle that we get there, the angle at P. Now, for us to get the angle at P, we will use the cosine rule. And cosine cos P will give us 530 square plus 670 square minus 520 square over 2 times 530 times 670. Remember, this is all coming from the cosine rule. A squared minus A squared is equal to B squared plus C squared minus 2BC cosine of A. So we have made cosine of A the subject of the formula, and now we are substituting directly into the formula. So we get P to be 48.7 degrees. Now this angle at P is 48.7 degrees, and we are supposed, assuming that we have the compass point at point P, then of course measuring from the north of that compass, then you will have it 180 plus this angle here. And now the bearing of Q from P will be 180 plus 48.7, and that gives us 229 degrees. 229